Good morning again. My name is Ashley McBride, and I want to welcome you to today's roundtable conversation. I am the state director for Our Future. We are a progressive organization that works to mobilize Pennsylvanians on issues and elections and empower them to create change that benefits families and communities. Today, we are gathered to have a conversation about Pennsylvania's COVID recovery. As we head into this 4th of July holiday weekend, a holiday that many are celebrating across the country who look forward to time with friends and family, cookouts, fireworks, we're supposed to celebrate it with pride as Americans. Those of us living in Pennsylvania must grapple with what just happened in our state legislature. The GOP-controlled legislature has decided to hold back billions of dollars in recovery funds from Pennsylvania, a decision that goes against our American ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Many of those funds from the American Rescue Plan that President Biden specifically designated for working people were held back. And after COVID-19, our leaders should be putting as many of these resources as they can towards helping people across the Commonwealth get back on their feet. I'm so happy today to be joined by two very special guests, one of them being State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, and also Jeff Garris, who is the coordinator of the 99% campaign from the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta has represented the 181st Legislative District in Philadelphia County since 2018. He currently serves as Vice Chair of the Philadelphia House Delegation. As a legislator, he has championed proposals to address generational poverty, raise the minimum wage, and protect workers' rights. Jeff Garris is the coordinator of the 99% Pennsylvania campaign, again, of the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, and has more than a decade and a half of experience working with advocacy organizations in Pennsylvania. As you all may know, for those of you who have joined us, Jeff is my right-hand man who joins me all the time. So I'm so happy again to have both of these. I want to give just a few minutes to the both of them to give opening remarks around the state of Pennsylvania's recovery and where our state is following last week's budget proceedings. I am going to start, actually, if you don't mind. Look, my friend is there. We were talking about, I'm sorry, I'm so excited. Representative Kenyatta, I'm always excited when we get this time together. I'm going to kick it off, if you don't mind, just giving us a few opening remarks, and then I will turn it over to Jeff, and then we want to just dig right in, if that's okay, Jeff and Malcolm. I'm sorry, I got really excited. I'm going to take that back. Representative Kenyatta, I get super excited. I apologize.
Oh my gosh, please. So happy to see you, Ashley, and it's Malcolm. It's fine. And Jeff, I'm sure we'll talk about this too in great detail. Talk about a missed opportunity. Talk about a missed opportunity. And what's incredibly frustrating is every single day we see the outcomes of what happens when we miss key opportunities like this. Right now in Pleasantville, Pennsylvania, you have drastic flooding along the roadways where we have known for a long time that we need to harden our infrastructure against these extreme weather events that we're seeing. We've been seeing flooding. It's not the first time we've seen flooding. But yet, this is the first time we've had $10 billion in terms of surplus revenue. I mean, and Jeff is the numbers guy, but think about this, $10 billion. And yet you had my Republican colleagues saying, oh no, we shouldn't do anything with this money. We should use it to make it easier for-profit charter school, private school operators to get state funds. We should use it to try to sneak into the budget a new bureau of election. I don't forget what the hell they call it. We're called election audits, whatever. I call it a new bureau of bullshit and lies. They have spent this time trying to do everything they can to maintain the status quo in a moment where we have seen that the status quo has failed so many Pennsylvania families. I mean, the holes that exist, they're so big in our safety net that people fell right through. You think about our unemployment system, which was in need of drastic resources being rushed to it to deal with the back-end technological infrastructure, but also to deal with ramping up the amount of people who work in that department to deal with the onslaught of cases. Right now, I'm in my district office every single day. We get people who come through this door who said, you know what, Rep, I haven't gotten unemployment from the beginning of the pandemic, from the very beginning. But yet we know, and we've known for a while, that the technology that folks in labor and industry are dealing with is technology that is, I mean, in some cases, we're talking about Windows 97, 98. I mean, come on. And we could have used some of that money to put us in a space where we have the technological capabilities to respond and then have the staff capabilities to respond. We had the money to put us in a place where we actually fully fund education. I don't understand how anybody in good conscience can be okay with Pennsylvania being 45th in terms of educational equity, 45th. And listen, I'm, with all due respect to some of the things that were in the budget that were a little bit better, I don't think a Band-Aid is good enough when you have a gushing wound, right? Maybe a little less blood, but you still have people who are bleeding out in our communities because we haven't done what's necessary to repair the systemic harm. I say all the time that we need folks whose feet are bloody from walking over the glass of government's inaction. And you have a lot of people whose feet are bloody. And we had a moment right now to not just put a Band-Aid, to not just put a little cup in the place of actually fixing the damn roof, but instead we've put cups and buckets and everywhere else, and we have the money to fix it, to actually fix the roof so it stops leaking in people's homes. But yet we stashed all this money away in the rainy day fund when people are drenched. And we've said, let's focus on everything but the issue that is in front of our face. Almost the only thing that these folks have been focused on is how to make it more difficult for you to vote. That is like the only thing they've been focused on. They have spent so much time, so many resources, so much energy trying to make it more difficult for people to vote. And even after the governor vetoed their proposal yesterday, they said, well, now what we're going to do is we're going to take those crap, garbage proposals, and we're going to try to put them in the Constitution. And so then they're going to have their millionaire pals, the Commonwealth Foundation, all these dark money groups now trying to trick people into giving away their voting rights. And I'm sure at some point the damn My Pillow guy will be here in Pennsylvania talking about how we need to do this. So we are in a tough situation that we did not have to be in. And I will end with this note because I think it is one of the examples that is most glaring for me. We know right now, and we knew this prior to COVID shutting down school buildings, that there are buildings in rural communities, in exurban communities, in urban communities where there is asbestos fallen from the ceiling like rain, where there are lead pipes that the kids can't drink the dang water in the school, where there are exposed heated pipes that are dealing with the heating that are exposed, where little babies could burn their arms. We know this. We've had all this time when the buildings have been physically closed, where we could have been going into these schools and actually remediating the asbestos and mold in these buildings. Now we have billions of dollars to actually fix this problem. We've done nothing. And so what we're going to do in a couple of months here is send our kids, our babies, back into buildings that we know are unsafe. And of all the missed opportunities, that one is actually the most disgusting because we have seen the pictures, we know it, and we have kids who have now, because of inaccessibility to high-speed internet, of the affordability of broadband and Wi-Fi, we know that there are going to be a lot of learning loss for our young people. We know that. And so we're going to send them into buildings that aren't safe and with teachers that aren't compensated in the way they need to, and without the resources that they need to prepare our kids for the future. And so of everything that we didn't do, from hardening our infrastructure, investing in green jobs, I think this one issue is probably one of the most disgraceful missed opportunities that I saw in this budget. And so, as you might suspect, I voted against the budget, and I'm not a big fan of it.
Thank you so much. Certainly want to turn it over, Jeff. Just any opening comments. Also, if you want to take the first question for Representative Kenyatta, I want to turn that over to you. And also just want to encourage people who have joined us via Zoom or on Facebook. If you have a question for Representative Kenyatta, please drop it in the chat. We are going to do our best to get through as many questions as possible. Also, if you have a story, how you've been impacted as a citizen, as a resident here in the Commonwealth, please share those with us as well at this time. I'll turn it over to you again. Thank you, Representative Kenyatta. Jeff.
Thanks so much for having me here today, Ashley, and it's great to be here with Representative Kenyatta, who I have to say, I think really laid out what happened here with our state budget. We at the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, where I work, are incredibly frustrated with this because Pennsylvania Republicans just left for summer vacation without doing anything to help workers, to help small businesses, to help renters who are struggling to keep up with their rent. It did nothing to help Pennsylvania school children in buildings that have been decimated by all kinds of environmental problems. I should say I'm a parent of a child in the Philadelphia school district. I'm also the parent of a teacher in the Philadelphia school district. My son teaches at a school in North Philadelphia that is on the list of toxic schools, where he goes in every day to put in his time and effort teaching special education to children who have so many strikes against them already, even at a young age. And on top of that, they're all together there in a building that is a toxic building. Pennsylvania Republicans did nothing for those kids. They did nothing for those teachers. They did nothing for my son, the teacher, and my daughter, the student. There are so many things that needed attention that did not get attention. And instead they rushed to get out the door for a summer vacation that will last through till the end of the summer. We're really frustrated with this at the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center because we had a really unusual, probably once in a generation opportunity here with this year's state budget. And I should note that today being July 1st, this is the start of the fiscal year for 21-22. That's what the state budget was passed. But yesterday, when we wrapped up the fiscal year from last year, when we had anticipated that there would be tremendous economic hardships, there'd be loss of revenue from people who had lost their jobs, weren't paying in taxes, weren't going out and spending money. But because of the relief that came through last year from the federal government, especially in the early days of the pandemic, providing folks with stimulus checks, you know, we actually came out better than anyone would have thought 1 year ago today. State ended with $3 billion in surplus funds from this past fiscal year. Now, most of the time when we get to this point, we're looking around and we're saying, guess what? We just ended the fiscal year $1.5 billion in the hole. $2 billion in the hole, sometimes even more than that. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason that keeps happening every year, because we have had irresponsible budgeting by the majority party in the General Assembly for well over a decade now, where they have concentrated on giving tax breaks to the wealthiest Pennsylvanians, breaks to corporations, completely eliminating some of the corporate taxes, eliminating the capital stock and franchise tax. These all totaled combined are draining out $4 billion of revenue that Pennsylvania would have had we not messed around with and not given away those kinds of big tax breaks. So as a result, we've been dealing with this structural deficit for years where, you know, the projections of where we're going to get the money are not realistic. They borrow quickly from one-time sources of revenues. They'll do things like, well, let's just delay the payment that we were supposed to make in June until July to the next fiscal year. We'll kick the can down the road. That's the kind of budgeting that they've been doing. And this has led to this ongoing structural deficit. And the thing that we continue to hear from them over and over is, well, we don't have the money to do this. Well, guess what? This year, they did have the money to do it. And what did they do with it? Nothing. They had the $3 billion in surplus funds from this past year, plus more than $7 billion in federal relief money coming through the American Rescue Plan. And we should note too, that that money is not President Biden's money. That's the taxpayers' money. People here in Pennsylvania pay their federal income taxes, and now the federal government in our time of need is responding and sending relief. And Republicans in Harrisburg basically just sat on it, shoved it into a corner. They talked about putting money into the rainy day fund. Hey, you know what, folks? We're coming out of like the equivalent of a massive hurricane, the kind of devastation that this pandemic has done to our economy, to people who are already hurting, people who are already struggling. And, you know, it's like the rain has stopped. People are starting to come out, looking at the devastation, looking at the losses that people have had. And there's this relief coming in on tractor trailers, and Republicans are going, oh, we'll put that in the storage. We might need this if we ever have a big storm. That's the kind of rainy day fund that they put together here. At the time when we actually need it, they're putting it away for future use. And why? Because they don't want to have to deal with the fact that their budgeting has created this ongoing structural deficit. And instead, I think they want to keep this on hand to try to mop this up over the next year or so, to plug in where they should have had money coming in from wealthy people in Pennsylvania. They want to plug in this money. It's just unbelievably irresponsible. And I would say, as a former clergy person and as somebody who subscribes to a lot of ideals about equality and humanity, I think this is immoral, what our state government has done, what Republicans in Harrisburg have done. And then they've gone off for their vacation. You know, we encouraged them for weeks now, for months, to invest in us, invest in the people of Pennsylvania. We had people calling their state representatives and state legislators, state senators. We had people rallying, doing vigils, calling for all of these things where we could put money. $1 billion in toxic schools in Philadelphia to fix them up. They didn't do that. Some of the biggest funding inequities between the wealthiest schools and the poorest schools in our state that would require about $4 billion to bring all the schools up to an acceptable level. They didn't do that. Despite using workers and small businesses as props for the last year and a half, the legislature left town blocking billions of dollars in federal aid from being used to help folks. They failed to help workers and small businesses while continuing to allow these big tax breaks to enrich the pockets of big corporations. They allocated no rescue plan funding to help local restaurants, bars, venues, other small businesses recover from the pandemic. Republicans blocked proposals to use this funding to make sure that every worker has access to childcare and paid sick leaves. Families are struggling to get by, get back to work, to put food on the table and provide for necessities for their children. But instead, Republicans have chosen to hoard this money. You know, there were a small number of bright spots in the budget, but almost all of them came at a cost. The money that was put into K-12 education, the increase in that was basically equal to what the federal government had already spent money allocated for that purpose. They had to use it for that. They don't get credit for that. They put in money into Level Up, $100 million to help the 100 school districts that are the most underfunded. But that's only a fraction of what the governor proposed. The governor proposed $1.3 billion to help those schools level up. So they've only taken a very small step. It's not one that they've had to do anything other than what the federal government sent them the money to do, and yet they continue to fail to do this. So I'll just wrap up by saying we're incredibly frustrated, incredibly bothered by the way that this General Assembly has irresponsibly sat on and just basically blocked this relief money from going to do what it's supposed to do, which is provide relief to Pennsylvanians. I guess my question for you, Representative Kenyatta, is do you see some possibilities here in the months ahead for ways that we as taxpayers, we as residents of Pennsylvania can put pressure on the General Assembly to start allocating some of this? You know, we had hoped they would do the allocation in conjunction with the budget. That would have made sense. They didn't do that. So now the money's sitting there. Are there possibilities for us to turn up the heat on them this summer and to push for this fall, for them to put the money into the kind of programs that this money was supposed to fund? I'd kind of like to get your take on that.
Yeah, so first, Jeff, I can't start being on a panel with you without thanking you so much, you and your entire team at the PA Budget and Policy Center. I say this all the time, the analysis that you do, but then also the advocacy that you all do is so critical to Pennsylvanians and also, many legislators understanding the nuance of this moment. And I know I underscored this in my opening remarks, but I really want people to understand the scale of what they did. Be it $10 billion. I mean, Jeff just outlined it. We're usually talking about $2 billion in the hole, usually $1.5 billion in the hole. We are $10 billion. And what's so frustrating is that, yes, I think that the advocacy, the activism that's been done, that needs to continue. But the problem is we don't get this moment back. We don't get this moment back. This is probably one of the most cynical things, and this is I don't know this to be true, so, folks don't quote me, but I'm looking at this very cynically, and I think a part of why this money has been sort of held hostage is that we are in the process right now of doing redistricting. And because of the work that so many people did a number of years ago in ensuring that we had a Democratic majority on the Supreme Court, and because of the work that folks like Fair Districts has done to elevate the issue of gerrymandering in the public consciousness, I think that they are holding on to this money in part to have leverage to try to get some better maps. And so that is a part of what I cynically believe they are trying to do. They want to hold hostage Pennsylvanians who need help so that they can continue to maintain power. Because let's be very clear, the majority that they have is a gerrymandered majority. And so I think that people need to do a couple of things. I don't think we can take our eye off the ball in terms of making sure that we have fair maps. We have to have fair maps, because if they hold on to this money next year as well, and some of these federal funds, obviously there's a certain time frame in which you need to spend them. But depending on what that time frame is, if they hold on to this money with the hope that, hey, maybe we can have the governor's mansion as well as majority in the House and the Senate next year, and then we can utilize all of that money for huge tax breaks in addition to the tax breaks that they already snuck into this last budget. I do think that folks can't take their eye off the ball in terms of using this as a moment to keep the pressure up around fair maps. And so I know that might not have been what you expected me to say, but I think that this is something we have to keep the eye on the ball on. The second thing is we have to keep our eye on the ball as it relates to what will probably be multiple constitutional amendments on everything from voter ID to limiting drop boxes. I suspect that we will see that, because if we don't win these next two things, what will happen is not only will we have a missed opportunity, but we'll have a whole missed decade and possibly a whole missed generation if we're not able to get a handle on the different ways that they have made it impossible for the will of the majority of Pennsylvanians to be what happens in Harrisburg. When we get back, I think that the type of activism that we saw from faith leaders, from other leaders who literally put their bodies on the line, who were literally detained for not silently because they were singing, but very peacefully sitting in outside of the Senate chamber, they arrested these folks. And what I found so absurd and hypocritical about that is my same colleagues who are saying that what happened on January 6th, nothing to see here, when people were actually armed with weapons, were like, yes, please arrest these people who are peacefully singing and sitting down. These are the real criminals we need to arrest, and don't ignore all the people who were a part of the insurrection, and ignore the people like Doug Mastriano, who was the leading candidate for governor, who actually helped bus people to the insurrection. And so these things, as always, turns out policy is interconnected. And so as much as we advocate for us using this money in an effective way to deal with the concerns people have, we have to start thinking about the structural issues that allow Republicans to maintain power in the first place.
Thank you so much. Certainly, again, I said it. Jeff Garris is my right hand man. He comes with all the numbers and makes sure that we there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Certainly, again, thank you, Representative Kenyatta, for taking this time. Question and comment for you. I think oftentimes, as Jeff alluded to, for the last year and a half, we've heard Republicans say all these reasons of why we can't do things, and particularly this conversation about raising the minimum wage and what it would mean to businesses, particularly small businesses. I was raised by a woman in the South who often told me, be careful, don't cut off your nose in spite of your face. And I feel like that is what has happened here, because Republicans could have helped local businesses, small businesses, but instead they still are talking about giving more tax breaks to corporations. They block, again, billions of dollars, more money than we've ever seen in surplus in our tax dollars. Again, not just something that like arbitrarily fell out of the sky. This is money that people across the Commonwealth have paid into our federal tax system to really help essential workers get higher wages, paid sick leave, hazard pay, like all of those things. And Democrats, both in DC, offered real plans, as well as those in Harrisburg, had detailed proposals to use Pennsylvania's recovery funds to actually support those who need it. I'm going to take a combination. I've seen questions in the chat. There was one over on our Facebook. And this is my question for you, taking those questions. I'm sorry. Essentially, forgive me, because I want to make sure that I do it right. You talked about really your decision to not support this budget, right? Can we talk about why you made the decision, why you felt like this was hurtful, and maybe even why some of your other colleagues voted for it?
Yeah, so
first tell me why, like, again, I think we could focus more on like your decision, because it's no accident that I wanted you to be here and to have this conversation. I felt that you would give it to us in the realest way possible, because again, I think one of the most painful things was seeing pictures of the caucus members coming together for those shots. They're not everything about this budget, I won't say is bad. Like we've talked about, there's some high points, but overwhelmingly it is disappointing. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And one of the things For Our Future does, we talk to voters, and again, we don't just go say, look, this is what you should care about. And the stories we're hearing from Pennsylvanians are disheartening. Just like you mentioned, a constituent in your district who says, I haven't received unemployment the entirety of this. And I just don't know if Republicans are that just out of touch with what is happening in their own districts. And again, they don't just represent the people who voted for them. They represent every member of that district, every voter, every non-voter. And so I just don't understand how.
Well, actually, I wish they believed that. I wish they believe that. And I'll give you the sort of technical terms here. I didn't vote for this budget because this budget was bullshit. That's why I didn't vote for it. It was a crap budget that did not meet the needs of Pennsylvanians. And so, no, I'm not putting my name on that to say I'm fine with us going a half a step in the right direction. And I think Jeff was absolutely right. A part of the things that were good in this budget were mandated for them to do by federal law. And so you don't get credit for doing the things that your hands were tied into doing. Like, most people understand this. This budget did nothing to help on any of the critical issues that were in front of us. And so it did not make sense for me to say, yes, this is something that people in my district approve of, as people in my district are worried every single day on the edge of their chairs, worrying when the eviction moratorium will be lifted, because for some folks, that's the only thing keeping them in their homes. When you talk about the minimum wage, if folks saw a video that went a bit viral when I was in the House Commerce Committee, let's be very clear. Republicans do not give a damn about small businesses. If you're a mom and pop business, if you're a small entrepreneur, Republicans are not for you. And they have done a really good job of couching their support for huge multinational corporations as supporting small business. They don't support small business. if they supported small business, particularly our hospitality industry, they wouldn't have blocked to-go cocktails, which were a lifeline for so many small restaurants who were able to do these mixed drinks to go, who now in the height of summer, the first time in over a year, right, where people will be out and about, this could have been a huge revenue generator for these businesses. So many restaurant owners talked about the fact that to-go cocktails saved them during the pandemic. And yet we didn't do it. And let's be very clear, we didn't do it because Mike Regan in the Senate, his brother, who like does beer distribution or whatever, who also his brother-in-law, excuse me, who also happens to be his biggest campaign supporter, he put in a piece, an amendment that helped his biggest campaign supporter. And then he tells us that no, that had nothing to do with it. That had nothing to do with it. Yes, he's my brother-in-law. Yes, he's my biggest campaign supporter. But no, this amendment, which I put into this bill, which specifically helps him, is not really about helping him. I mean, like, how stupid do you have to think people are for anybody to buy that? And just think about that. The needs of one person's brother-in-law, one person's campaign supporter, overrode the needs for small restaurants all across the Commonwealth, who begged for us to do something about to-go cocktails and allowing the outdoor seating. The outdoor seating piece, obviously, that's been relatively fixed, but still, this is what we're talking about. And going back to just put a button on this, on like, hey, why aren't they representing all their constituents? Because yet again, their biggest campaign supporters, the Commonwealth Foundation, which sinks millions and millions of dollars into their campaigns, their head policy director came before our committee and said she believes the minimum wage to be $0. That is their position, that there should be no minimum wage. And so when they say, hey, I'm not, what we want is for, because sometimes you hear this thing of, let's stop focusing on the minimum wage. We want people to make more than that because they're well-trained, whatever. Their actual position is that they don't care if you make $0. As long as the Commonwealth Foundation and the people who fund the Commonwealth Foundation are able to continue to stand on the necks of working people to maintain their position, that is what they are fine with. And when I think about it over and over and over again, my mom was a home health care aide. And I think about all the time the fact that she worked with folks in healthcare every single day and then came home and couldn't afford her insulin. I think about the fact that we've strung these big banners up outside of, all across the Commonwealth, all across the country, these huge banners saying essential workers work here, how wonderful are they? Save money on the damn banner next time and actually pay people. Don't praise people, pay people. Don't celebrate people, compensate people. But the reason they don't do that is because they believe that working people who actually drive Pennsylvania's economy, they do not give a damn about you, and they have made it clear.
I'm going to turn the next question. Thank you so much, Representative Kenyatta. I'm going to turn the next question over to Jeff, but I want to say to both of y'all, could one of you all help me understand what would constitute for a rainy day? Like, I'm not sure. Like, I know we talk about putting money in savings, $5 billion, another $2 billion in a rainy day. Like, what the hell is a rainy day? Because it feels like an entire tsunami. All of the natural disasters that could be happening to families across the Commonwealth right now are happening. So again, I'll say that to both of you all, and then you don't really have to answer, but it is a thought for all of us, because I'm trying to understand. I don't know if I get it, but Jeff, I'm sorry, I'm gonna turn it over to you for the next question.
Sure. Yeah, I'll take a quick stab at that. I mean, it moves money out of the budget for that year. It puts it into a rainy day fund. I think there's even some stipulations about it needing maybe like a supermajority vote to take the money out of the rainy day fund, which creates a lot of challenges. When do you find time to get like a supermajority vote on anything in the General Assembly? So, that's troublesome. Representative Kenyatta may want to touch on that too, and the mechanics of the rainy day fund. There's a question that came here in the chat, sort of a related question, wondering if the budget included any additions for mental health, school and social services, additional monies to help the mental health crisis in relation to the after effects of COVID. Wondering, Representative Kenyatta, if you want to touch on that as well, and any additions for these kinds of services.
I think you're absolutely right, and it really is unfortunate that we can't get supermajorities on things that have supermajority support of Pennsylvania. But I don't know if we will. I don't know when we will get the votes ever to do it. And they've been clear that they want to use this money to offset any potential future tax increases, in the future. And it's why I keep going back to gerrymandering, that if we don't make sure we have fair maps, we'll continue to have folks who do not represent majority of the voters, but because they carved up the voters in these funky ways, will continue to represent a majority of the General Assembly. And what's really worrying about a bunch of the things that we've done, particularly with the constitutional amendments around, declaring future emergencies, is, all of us have seen, the news reports about the Delta variant of the COVID virus. We all know, public health experts have warned about this for a long time, and COVID was a perfect example, that these respiratory, pathogens, certainly we're going to continue to see mutations, but this is one of the biggest fears that public health experts at the WHO, World Health Organization, and even in our own CDC and other things have been very concerned about. And we have not done nearly enough to make sure we are preparing for an actual future issue in terms of, stockpiling PPE and other things. We had PPE at the farm show complex, Jeff, as you well know, as many people know, and they spent a bunch of time saying, hey, let's get rid of the PPE, let's move it out of the farm show complex, let's, I don't know what they want to do with it, throw it into a ditch somewhere, because they don't believe in basic science. And so I feel like what we have done is put ourselves in a position where we can never truly respond to the next crisis, because the only crisis they believe is a crisis is when their donors have to pay more money in taxes. That's the only crisis that they believe.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's pretty accurate description of what they see as the problem. On the question about the budget and any additions for mental health, schools, social services, there were some modest increases, basically keeping up with increased costs. For instance, on the K-12 education, the additional money going to public education is basically offset by the dollar amount that's going to come out for charter schools and cyber charter schools in Pennsylvania. You give them $300 million here, and then you let the cyber charters and other charters siphon off $300 million. So unfortunately, we keep lagging farther and farther behind. We're now at the very bottom, in the bottom 6 in terms of funding for public education in Pennsylvania as a share of the state budget and as a share of what's going into the schools. On social services, one bright spot there was the increase for services for people with intellectual disabilities. There has been a problem with the waiting list. Students finish their public education at age 21. They're out of the public school system. And many families have had to wait, sometimes 2 years or more for them to be approved for community-based services. And, it's called an emergency waiting list. If you have to wait 2 years for an emergency, that's a serious problem. So there was some increase there. I think that was a very small bright spot. But again, most of the increases in the budget were ones that were related to the increased costs for administering those programs. So it's extremely unfortunate that that's the direction that things have headed. Yeah, and I see my colleague at Budget and Policy Center, Mark Steer, put in a note there that the new money for K-12 education doesn't even catch up with inflation. And that's why at least 60% of the school districts are raising taxes this year. And that's mostly in the form of property taxes. For those of us in Philadelphia, there's some other taxes as well. But it's putting more and more of the cost of public education on the local community. And if a local community is not wealthy and has a lot of challenges, they're not going to be able to put much into it. And that's how we have this increasingly inequitable system here in Pennsylvania.
And Jeff, and if I could make a point there as well, we have a lot of folks who live in suburban or ex-urban communities who have really nice homes, right? But who are sort of land rich and income poor. And so when you increase those property taxes, yet again, these people who say they hate taxes, let's be very clear, they don't hate taxes. They only hate taxes for multinational corporations and for the uber wealthy. If you're middle class or poor, they don't care, because for most middle income families, the home is the biggest asset that you have, and they're not seeing their wages increase at a rate that meets the amount of property taxes that they're seeing. And so even for folks who are in Montgomery County or Delco or whatever, this is a huge burden that's put on them, in particular for our seniors. And folks, if they don't know, should know, Pennsylvania, we are an aging state at this point. We have really high proportion of folks who are seniors who are on fixed incomes. And so if you're on a fixed income and your property taxes keep going up, you're going to see what we're seeing all across the Commonwealth, and certainly really pronounced here in my district in Philadelphia, where you have a bunch of seniors who are having to downsize or having to sell the home that they raised their kids in because they can't afford the increase in property taxes as a result of the state's refusal to pay its fair share in terms of education.
Thank you so much. We have gotten a question in the chat. Also, we have been hearing this in our conversations on phones. Representative Kenyatta, it's really one of those, like, are we doomed? Is there anything we could do? Like, what happens next? And then also want to ask you, because I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity just to lift up, what we've been hearing a lot about a need for kind of infrastructure and jobs plan, the need for really the priorities in the Americans Family Plan. What are you hearing regarding this? Are you hearing anything from your constituents in support of, or really what's the conversation been around that you've heard about these things?
So let me start with the first part of your question, and let me be very clear with folks. We cannot get into a doomed mentality. We cannot get into that mentality, because the folks who don't want to invest in our communities in the ways that we're talking about, those folks don't take a day off. They don't take a break. When they don't get exactly what they want, they don't quit. All these folks who I have no idea how they've been elected to anything, they never stop showing up and raising their hands and saying, hey, pick me. They show up every election. They show up every time. As I just mentioned with the election bill, they didn't say, well, the governor vetoed our bill, so now let's move on to do something else. They said, okay, well, now let's try to do it the constitutional amendment process. After they wrote the letter asking to throw out all your votes, they said, okay, well, let's now take it to the court and try to get it thrown out that way. And so the opponents to us investing in our families, the folks who don't believe that every single Pennsylvanian, no matter where you live, that your kids should have a good school, that your infrastructure should be hardened in a way that keep communities safe and allow communities to thrive, that we should deal with the existential threat of the climate crisis, that we should deal with the mountains of debt that poor folks are dealing with. Those people do not take a day off. We cannot take a day off. And we can't get into this loser mentality, because the reason they are fighting us so hard is because they know that we can win. People don't fight you hard if they think you're going to lose. They fight you hard because they think you're going to win. And so we are going to win. And that's why I'm not despondent. I'm frustrated, but I'm not despondent. I'm not depressed. I'm not sad. What I am is committed more than ever to make sure that we deal with the structural issues that allow a minority party to have majority control of our state. And so don't get weary, fight harder. In terms of what folks are saying, it's very, very simple. people think that government should actually do things for people. Like it's very common sense that government should do things for people. And there are things that we could be doing right now that I would have loved to see his significant investments in, retrofitting our buildings, moving our public transit fleets to electric, making sure that low-income families who want to do things like solar panels on their home, that they can actually afford to do it with a mix of grants and tax credits. These are all things that we could have done. And as Jeff outlined, there is still $5 billion that they stored away. And so if we do what we need to do to make sure we have a majority in a year and a half from now, a majority in Harrisburg that believes in these things, then we can do what we need to do in making those investments. We won't be making them as quickly as we need to, but we all understand progress has never come in on a wave. It's come in on a ripple. But we have to keep allowing that to happen, because to use your tsunami metaphor, tsunamis start from those ripples. Starts very small and it builds and builds and builds. And what you're seeing is a build and build and build of a people-powered movement of people for the first time in their lives are seeing the impact of their voices when they step up and speak up. And so you don't have to win right away, but you will lose if you stop fighting.
I'll just jump in here and comment, not to take issue with what you said, Representative Kenyatta, about the $5 billion that they've still got on hand there. It's actually $7.5 billion. In fact, it's been the Republican talking point machines that have been trying to put this idea out there of $5 billion. And then, it's really based on misleading accounting. The reality is there's still $7.5 billion available.
This is why you're the number.
We have to make sure we take it. Well, that's why I have my boss on here commenting in the chat. There's a comment there from Mark about that, so I'll give him the credit for that. I work with a lot of very smart people, and I learn from them. So we have to make sure that we're using the right numbers, and that's part of what we do at Budget and Policy Center. I saw a question in there in the chat from Scott about how the state budget continues to insufficiently fund public education, and asking how do we change this political mentality of our legislators. I'll just comment very quickly and say that certainly folks can engage with our friends here at For Our Future Pennsylvania in education funding issues. I would also encourage folks to go to a project of the Keystone Research Center, which is what Budget and Policy Center is part of, called Education Voters of Pennsylvania. Go online and look up Education Voters of Pennsylvania, get involved with Susan Spica, the education director there, the executive director there, who's doing great work. There's also a large coalition of a whole lot of different groups called the PA Schools Work Coalition, PA Schools Work. You can look that up online. They're doing a lot of events, training folks in how to talk with legislators, how to understand the issues. We may not get everything that we want and that we want to fight for, but we're certainly going to have to fight for everything that we get.
And Jeff, can I say something just really quick, or Ashley, excuse me, can I say something really quick?
Absolutely.
And this is a hack. I will tell people, I think the most effective thing you can do when you're trying to reach out to your legislator is do phone calls, particularly to their district offices, more than the Harrisburg offices, because a lot of legislators spend more time in their district office than Harrisburg office. And I will tell you, when I get a bunch of calls to my office about something, I hear about that more than a bunch of letters, more than a bunch of emails. A bunch of my colleagues don't even check their own email. I'm just being honest. So I'm not saying don't email. You should email. But I am saying that if you have the time to make a phone call, and I know that Budget Policy Center and others, will help you get the numbers of specific your legislator, but also key legislators who chair the certain committee where priority issues for you happen to go. But please make those phone calls to their district offices. They will hear about it. We as legislators do hear about those phone calls.
Absolutely.
And if you have a few friends to go along with you, you can go to their district office. They're not often used to that. particularly going to their district office when you know that they're home in the district and they're there. I went a couple of years ago to one of the suburban state house reps' offices with about 7 or 8 of their constituents. Most of them were older folks. And by the time we got to the front door, they had already called the police because they saw this mob of 7 or 8 people there. And when we asked why, they said, well, because we've never had this many people here before. So, you know, they can let 300 people in the Capitol Rotunda at a rally roll off their backs because it's not happening in their district and their constituents aren't seeing it. But when you go to their district office and you stand there with signs doing a vigil, even a small number of folks have a tremendous impact, and it bothers them far more than the 300-person rally in the Capitol. So I just wanted to throw that in as one other thing that folks can do.
Absolutely, absolutely. First, again, want to say thank you both to Jeff and Representative Kenyatta. Representative Kenyatta, I know that you have stayed beyond your originally agreed upon time, and so I want to thank you so much for that. Want to offer an opportunity now, Representative Kenyatta, if there are any final, comments or anything you want to share with those who have joined us today, I'm certainly welcome you to do that. And again, I want to say thank you to Jeff Garris, who again always makes sure that we are absolutely 100% together on the numbers. He is definitely our guy. So thank you to both of you.
He's the best. I want to just say 2 things. First, I just want to say thank you, Ashley, to you, to the entire the For Our Future team. Thank you. You all are doing really Omen's work. Also, the same. Thank the PA Budget and Policy, Center. And I'm telling you, they did not ask me to do this. PA Budget Policy Center, nonprofit. And I believe, Jeff, the folks can go on your website to donate. I don't know all the places that they can donate. Maybe you can, put it in the chat. But if we don't have partners like this at the state level who are able to do this work, we are in a really tough spot. We're in a really tough spot. And so please support these organizations. Jeff listed so many organizations. I know there's the new Pennsylvania project now as well, which our good friend Kadita is leading and standing up. If you have $5, $10, $20 to support these organizations doing this activation work, Lord knows they need it, and we are all better off for it. And so my plug is for you to support the work of these organizations. And thank you all so much for your time, for your advocacy, and I will see you out there.
Thank you so much. For people who may have joined us late, again, certainly want to thank again Jeff Garris, Representative Malcolm Kenyatta for their time today. Again, just kind of wrap stuff up. Pennsylvania Republicans left for a summer break without doing anything to help workers or small businesses. They stashed away $7 billion in funding from the Biden administration to protect their political interests in corporations and wealthy individuals that benefit, while workers and small businesses got nothing. This, again, is not just some magical money that fell out of anywhere. This is our money. And we want our communities to benefit it, not just Republican interests, political interests. Despite using workers and small businesses as props for the last year and a half, the legislature, again, they left town, blocking billions in federal aid from being used to help us. They failed to help workers and small businesses while giving out billions of dollars in tax breaks for big corporations. They allocated no rescue plan funding to help local restaurants, bars, venues, and other small businesses recover from this pandemic. They blocked proposals to use funding to make sure that every worker has access to childcare and paid sick leave. Families across the Commonwealth are struggling to get back to work and to keep food on the table and to provide necessities for their families. Instead of hoarding $7 billion for their own political interests, we need to make sure that they work for us and solve real problems that we're facing across the Commonwealth. At this time, I'm going to welcome, I'm not sure who is doing the call to action from FOF, whoever that person is, please come on, let's do it. But again, while they're getting prepared, Jeff, again, you are indeed a godsend. You are always, it is a pleasure to partner with you. So glad to see Mark Steer from Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, We the People campaign, join us today. Again, the work that you do and the resources that you provide so many of us across the Commonwealth, they're really not words to say. So we are forever grateful for all of your work and your support. All right, Liliana, is that you, CJ? All right, they're gonna put up a screen. I don't know who's doing it. I think Representative Malcolm Kenyatta already said it. Like, the number way to make sure that our legislators are hearing us, again, we certainly want to take the time to thank those who worked hard on behalf of us and let them know that how much we are pleased with their work. But we also got to let the other side know, like, look, you have fallen short. You can call your legislators, but there is hopefully a screen that is going to come up with a link, and I don't know if that is coming up, but it is a direct link. I also see it put in the chat, FOFPA .link /43T. Again, is someone from our team? Liliana, you ready? I apologize. I'm gonna be quiet now.
No, it's okay. I was having some technical difficulties here. But yes, we, love to make sure that we are giving the opportunities to folks who show support. We, aside from what Ashley was speaking about, is how we can contact our legislators. We also have different opportunities within it for our future to volunteer and share your time with us. So we did drop the link in here, and this link directs you to write an email to your legislator to make sure that they do support, and shame on them for pushing this budget that does not show and support all Pennsylvanians here in the Commonwealth. So please copy and paste the link into your web browser, send your elected official an email to let them know that you do not support with their choice, and they need to be keeping a lookout for all Pennsylvanians and not just who are their supporters, because again, they are a representative of all their constituents, not only the selected few that they that voted for them. So please, please, please make sure you copy and paste that link into your browser and send those elected officials a piece of your mind.
Thank you again to each person who has taken the time to join us on this day. We are grateful for your support. We look forward to continuing this conversation and many others. Have a wonderful day and a happy 4th of July.